Little girl calls 911 at mum's wedding to reveal a secret about her fiancé. The church bells were ringing, the flowers were perfectly arranged, and Sarah Matthews was about to marry the man of her dreams. But as she stood at the altar in her flowing white dress, something was terribly wrong. Her 7-year-old daughter Lily wasn't smiling like she should be on this special day. Instead, the little girl was clutching a pink plastic phone in her trembling hands, tears streaming down her face as she dialed 3 numbers that would change everything. 911. Hello, police. My mummy is about to marry a bad man and I don't know what to do. What Lily revealed in that phone call would expose a web of lies so shocking that it would leave an entire wedding party speechless and save her mother from what could have been the biggest mistake of her life. But before we dive into this incredible story, I want you to comment below and let me know where you're watching from around the world. And if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button, because stories like this one will absolutely blow your mind. 3 months earlier, Sarah Matthews thought she had finally found her happy ending. After her divorce 2 years ago, the 32-year-old elementary school teacher had focused entirely on rebuilding her life and raising her daughter Lily as a single mother. She had given up on love, convinced that finding someone who would truly care for both her and her child was impossible. That's when Marcus Thompson walked into her life like something out of a fairy tale. Marcus was everything Sarah had dreamed of in a partner. Tall, handsome, with kind eyes and a smile that could light up a room. He was a successful businessman who owned several restaurants across the state, drove a luxury car, and always seemed to have plenty of money for romantic gestures. More importantly, he seemed to adore Lily from the moment he met her. He would bring her little gifts, take her to the park, and even offered to help with her homework. Sarah watched in amazement as her shy, reserved daughter began to open up to this wonderful man who had entered their lives. The whirlwind romance moved quickly. Within 6 weeks, Marcus had proposed with a stunning diamond ring during a sunset dinner at the beach. Lily had been there too, giggling with excitement, as Marcus got down on one knee and asked not just for Sarah's hand in marriage, but for permission to become Lily's stepfather. It seemed like the perfect moment, the perfect proposal, the perfect new beginning for their little family. Sarah said yes without hesitation. Here was a man who loved her daughter as much as he loved her, who wanted to provide for them both, who promised to give them the stable, loving home they deserved. The wedding planning began immediately, and Marcus spared no expense. He insisted on paying for everything: the venue, the flowers, the catering, even Sarah's dress. He said he wanted their special day to be absolutely perfect. But as the wedding day approached, something began to change in Lily's behavior. The bubbly, excited little girl who had been so thrilled about having a new daddy became quiet and withdrawn. She started having nightmares and would crawl into her mother's bed in the middle of the night, crying but unable to explain why. When Sarah asked what was wrong, Lily would just shake her head and say she was fine. Sarah attributed her daughter's behavior to normal pre-wedding jitters. After all, it was a big change for a 7-year-old to understand. She reassured Lily that Marcus loved them both and that their family was only going to get bigger and better. But Lily's distress seemed to grow worse with each passing day. The night before the wedding, Sarah found Lily sitting on her bedroom floor, surrounded by crayons and paper, frantically drawing picture after picture. When Sarah looked at the drawings, her heart clenched. They were all variations of the same scene: a little girl standing alone while 2 adults walked away from her. In one drawing, there were dark scribbles over the man's face. In another, the little girl was crying giant blue tears. "Sweetie, what are these pictures about?" Sarah asked gently, kneeling down beside her daughter. Lily looked up with tears in her eyes. "Mommy, what if he doesn't really want me? What if he only wants you?" Sarah's heart broke. She pulled her daughter into her arms and held her tight. "Oh, honey, that's not true at all. Marcus loves you so much. He tells me all the time how lucky he feels to have you as his daughter. Tomorrow is going to be the start of something beautiful for all of us." But even as she spoke the words, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Over the past few weeks, she had noticed little things about Marcus that seemed off. Phone calls he would take in private, mysterious business trips that came up suddenly, and a tendency to change the subject whenever she asked too many questions about his past or his family. When she brought up meeting his relatives before the wedding, he claimed they lived far away and wouldn't be able to make it. Something about his explanations always felt rehearsed, but Sarah pushed her doubts aside. She was probably just being paranoid because she was scared of being hurt again. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and beautiful. Sarah woke up feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness that she assumed was perfectly normal for any bride. She spent the morning getting ready with her sister and her best friend, laughing and sipping champagne as they did her hair and makeup. Lily sat quietly in the corner, still in her pajamas, watching the preparations with serious eyes. "Come here, baby girl," Sarah called to her daughter. "Let's get you into your pretty dress." Lily had been so excited to be the flower girl when they first picked out her pale pink dress with its flowing tulle skirt and sparkly bodice, but now she seemed reluctant to put it on. Sarah helped her get dressed, brushing her long blonde hair and placing a small tiara on her head. "You look like a princess," Sarah said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Are you ready to walk down that aisle and throw flower petals?" Lily nodded solemnly, but Sarah noticed she was clutching something in her small hands. It was her toy phone, a bright pink plastic device that she had carried everywhere when she was younger but hadn't played with in months. "Why don't you leave that here, sweetie? You won't need it during the ceremony." "I want to keep it with me," Lily said firmly. "Just in case." "In case of what?" "In case I need to call someone." Sarah felt a small pang of worry, but her sister was already rushing them out the door, reminding them that they couldn't be late to Sarah's own wedding. There wasn't time to dig deeper into what Lily meant. The church was packed with friends and family, all dressed in their finest clothes and beaming with happiness for Sarah's special day. The flowers were gorgeous, the music was perfect, and everything seemed to be going exactly as planned. Sarah stood at the back of the church in her flowing white gown, feeling like she was living in a dream. Marcus stood at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, his face lighting up when he saw her. The wedding march began to play, and Lily walked down the aisle first, scattering rose petals from her small basket. But instead of the joyful skip Sarah had expected, Lily walked slowly, almost reluctantly, her eyes downcast and her free hand still clutching that pink plastic phone. Sarah followed, floating down the aisle on her father's arm, smiling at all the happy faces of their guests. When she reached the altar, Marcus took her hands and whispered, "You look absolutely beautiful. I can't wait to make you my wife." The ceremony began, and everything seemed perfect. The pastor spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage and the joy of blending two families into one. But as the vows were being exchanged, Sarah noticed that Lily was growing more and more agitated. The little girl was shifting from foot to foot, looking around nervously and clutching that toy phone even tighter. "Do you, Marcus Thompson, take Sarah to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Marcus said confidently, his voice carrying clearly through the church. "And do you, Sarah Matthews, take Marcus to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" Sarah opened her mouth to say, "I do," but before the words could come out, a small voice interrupted the ceremony. "Wait!" Lily called out, her voice high and frightened. "Stop! Please stop!" The entire church fell silent. 200 guests turned to stare at the 7-year-old girl who had just interrupted a wedding ceremony. Sarah felt her face flush with embarrassment and confusion. "Lily, sweetie, what's wrong?" she asked gently. But instead of answering her mother, Lily lifted the pink plastic phone to her ear and began to speak into it loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Hello? Is this 911? I need help. My mommy is about to marry a bad man, and I don't know what to do." Gasps echoed through the church. Sarah's heart stopped. Marcus's face went pale, and she saw something flash in his eyes that she had never seen before: panic. "Lily, honey, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, kneeling down to her daughter's level. That's just a toy phone. You can't actually call anyone with it." "I know, Mummy," Lily said, tears starting to stream down her face, "but I practiced what I would say if I could call for real. Because I know something bad about Marcus, and I've been scared to tell you because I didn't want to make you sad." The church was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Marcus stepped forward, his voice tight with forced calm. "Lily, sweetheart, whatever you think you know, maybe this isn't the best time to—" "No," Lily said firmly, taking a step back from him. "I have to tell. I heard you on the phone, Marcus. I heard you talking to someone about Mommy." Sarah's world began to tilt. "What did you hear, baby?" Lily took a shaky breath and looked directly at Marcus, her 7-year-old voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone. "I heard him tell someone that he didn't really love us. He said Mommy was just a way to get money, and that he was going to leave us after the wedding. He said I was annoying and he couldn't wait to get rid of me." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She looked up at Marcus, searching his face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would prove her daughter was mistaken. Instead, she saw the truth written in his expression, guilt, anger, and the look of a man whose carefully constructed lies had just crumbled around him. "That's not true," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She must have misunderstood something. You know how children are. They don't always understand adult conversations." But Lily wasn't finished. "I heard more than that," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I heard you tell someone that Mommy's house was worth a lot of money and that you could sell it after you were married. You said you already had another girlfriend in a different city and that you were going to move there with her after you got Mommy's money." Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. Everything was starting to make sense. The rushed engagement, his insistence on paying for the wedding, his reluctance to talk about his family or his past. She looked around at the shocked faces of their guests, at her father's protective anger, at her sister's horrified expression. "Marcus," she said quietly, standing up slowly, "tell me Lily is wrong. Tell me right now that none of this is true." For a moment, Marcus seemed to consider continuing the charade. He looked at the 200 witnesses, at the pastor holding the marriage license, at all the money he had invested in this elaborate scheme. Then something in his expression changed, and the mask finally slipped completely. "Fine," he said coldly, his voice taking on a tone Sarah had never heard before. "You want the truth? Your kid is smarter than I gave her credit for." He loosened his tie and looked around the church with contempt. "This whole thing was getting tedious anyway. Do you have any idea how exhausting it's been pretending to care about a whiny 7-year-old and her boring, naive mother?" The cruelty in his voice was like ice water thrown in Sarah's face. This was a man she had never seen before, a stranger wearing the face of someone she thought she loved. "The house, the money, all of it," Marcus continued, seeming to relish the shock on everyone's faces. "Dating single mothers is easy money if you know what you're doing. They're so desperate for love and stability that they'll believe anything. I've done this 3 times before, and I would have gotten away with it again if your brat hadn't been eavesdropping." Sarah felt her knees go weak, but before she could collapse, she felt a small hand slip into hers. Lily was beside her, looking up with eyes full of love and determination. "I'm sorry I had to tell, Mommy," Lily whispered, "but I couldn't let him hurt us." Sarah knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her as tightly as she could. "You did the right thing, baby. You saved us both." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Sarah's father and several male guests escorted Marcus out of the church while someone called the real police to report the attempted fraud. It turned out that Marcus Thompson wasn't even his real name, and the authorities had been looking for him in connection with similar scams in other states. As the guests slowly filed out of the church, many stopping to hug Sarah and tell her how sorry they were, Sarah sat in the front pew still in her wedding dress, holding Lily close. The little girl who had saved her from making the biggest mistake of her life was now sleeping peacefully in her arms, exhausted from the emotional ordeal, but finally at peace. Sarah's sister approached carefully. "Sarah, are you okay? What do you need?" Sarah looked down at her daughter, and then up at her sister with tears in her eyes, but for the first time in hours, she was actually smiling. "I need to thank my daughter," she said softly. "And then I need to remember that I already have everything I need right here." In the months that followed, Sarah learned the full extent of Marcus's deception. He had been running similar cons across multiple states, targeting single mothers with assets and children who could serve as character witnesses to his supposed good nature. The fake business, the expensive gifts, even the proposal at the beach. It had all been carefully calculated to win her trust and get access to her finances. But more importantly, Sarah learned something about her daughter that she would never forget. Lily had known something was wrong for weeks, but had struggled with how to tell her mother without breaking her heart. She had practiced that 911 call over and over with her toy phone, preparing for the moment when she might need to find the courage to speak up. The story of their interrupted wedding spread through their small town and eventually caught the attention of local news outlets. People were amazed by the 7-year-old girl who had saved her mother from a dangerous predator, and Lily became something of a local hero. But for Sarah, the real miracle wasn't the attention or the praise. It was the reminder that the most important relationship in her life had been there all along. 6 months later, Sarah and Lily moved to a new town for a fresh start. Sarah took a job at a new school, and Lily quickly made friends and joined the children's choir. They spent their evenings reading together, playing games, and talking about everything and nothing. Sarah dated occasionally, but she was no longer desperate to find someone to complete their family. She had learned that she and Lily were already complete, exactly as they were. On the anniversary of what would have been her wedding day, Sarah took Lily out for ice cream, just the two of them. As they sat in the little parlor sharing a sundae, Sarah looked at her daughter, now 8 years old and more confident than ever, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Lily," she said, "I never properly thanked you for what you did that day. You were so brave, and you saved us both from something terrible." Lily looked up from her ice cream, vanilla smeared on her chin, and smiled. "I wasn't being brave, Mommy. I was scared the whole time, but I love you too much to let someone hurt you." "Do you know what that makes you?" Sarah asked, reaching over to wipe her daughter's chin. "What?" "The best daughter in the whole world, and the only family I'll ever need." As they walked home, hand in hand, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 1 year. She had thought she needed someone else to make her family whole, but Lily had shown her that they were already perfect, just as they were. The 7-year-old girl who had pretended to call 911 at her mother's wedding hadn't just saved Sarah from a con man. She had saved her from forgetting that the greatest love of her life was already sleeping in the room down the hall every night. Sometimes the most important 911 calls are the ones that remind us that we already have everything we need to be rescued. We just need the courage to listen to the people who love us most. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to remember that family comes in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in the power of love and courage.